When it comes time to connect your Cintiq, let me point out a couple of the cables on the back of the unit. Right out the back, the smallest cable is your power connection. This is where you're going to take the cable from your power brick and plug it into the unit. In addition to that, you've got your USB connection. This is what transmits the tablet portion. Finally, you've got a DVI-D digital-only connection right here. Now, in addition to that, there's also a full-size DisplayPort cable that is in the compartment itself. If you require this, all you have to do is take off these 4 individual screws and pull that cable out. Finally, if you have a requirement to use a VGA connection, pulling off this compartment and running a VGA cable from the unit down through the handle and out the back can be used as well. Instructions on doing so can be found in the user manual. So once you have the Cintiq placed on your desk, you want to move it into a comfortable position. I'm going to review a couple of the options to move the Cintiq around, and then we'll start to work on it. So the handles on the side will allow you to raise or lower its vertical position. In addition to that, the release handle underneath the display will allow you to release the position of the arms. Now the Cintiq can move freely from an upward to a downward position. To access the WACOM tablet properties, go up to the top of the display and press the wrench icon. That's a nice little shortcut to bring up your WACOM tablet properties. Once you're in here, to calibrate your pen, make sure that you have your grip pen selected in the tool row, and then tap on the Calibrate tab within the panel. Now, clicking on the Calibrate button will bring up crosshairs on your display. What you want to do here is you want to sit comfortably in front of the display in the position that you would normally work on it. Now, to calibrate, you want to take your pen and tap with the tip in the center of each crosshair that appears on your screen. Doing so will line up the cursor underneath your pen. When you're done, go ahead and click OK. Now your pen tip is calibrated for your display. Once you've calibrated your pen, I want to go over just a couple of basic things that you should be aware of when you're navigating and selecting objects. So, for example, I'm resting my hand on the Cintiq itself and I'm hovering the pen tip above the display surface by about 1/4 inch. And in doing so, you can see now that my cursor is following the pen on the screen. If I wanted to select something, instead of clicking on it as I would with a mouse, I tap on it. To open up a folder, for example, I would either double tap to open it, or if your pen is set to its defaults, the back button on the pen is set to a double click. So hovering above it, again by about 1/4 inch, reaching back with your thumb or your index finger tapping on that button will enable you to open the folder, essentially rendering a double click. When I'm in a folder, if I wanted to select a file, again, all I have to do is tap on it to select it, or again, if I wanted to open it, I could reach back and hit that back button or double tap it to open the file. I'll go ahead and close that up. If you wanted to select multiple files within a folder, all you have to do is tap holding your pen down and dragging up, picking up your pen to release it, will select a series of files. To move a window or a file or object, for example, what you would do is you would tap and hold with your pen to the display, dragging to the point at which you want to release the object or window, and then pick up your pen. Doing so is the equivalent of clicking and dragging with a mouse. To access your functions, such as the express keys and the touch ring, press the wrench icon at the top of your display. When your properties show up on screen, go into the tool row and make sure that you have functions selected. Doing so will reveal your express keys, your touch ring, and radial menu. What you do here in this panel is modify the function of those buttons by using the drop-down menus on screen. For example, if I wanted to set one of the express keys to a keystroke, I would click on the drop-down menu for that particular express key, click keystroke, and then add a function. For example, Control-Alt-Z in Photoshop would undo. Now keep this in mind. Once I've done that, I click OK. Keep this in mind. One of the nice things about the WACOM tablet properties is the ability to assign application-specific settings. So in this case, what I did was I assigned that particular express key right here to undo. But that particular function applies to all applications, whether I'm in Word, whether I'm in Photoshop, or what have you. To assign application-specific settings, what you need to do is add your application to the application row. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. Next to the application row, to the right-hand side, I'm going to tap on the plus sign. There's going to be a dialog box that opens up and asks me to select an application that's currently running. In this case, I want to add Photoshop. Photoshop happens to be running, so all I have to do is click Photoshop and then OK. If the application was not running, all I'd have to do is click Browse and then go look for it and select it. But anyways, it's running, so I'm going to go ahead and tap OK. Now with the Photoshop icon in my application row, and once it's selected, anything that I assign to any of my Express keys will be applied specifically to Photoshop. All right, let's go back over here to All Other, and I'm just going to click Defaults, so that goes back to that Shift. Now I'm going to make sure that I have Photoshop selected, and we'll go ahead and apply that function again. Now keep this in mind. You may notice that it actually says Undo. The reason why it does is because I added Photoshop after I had made that selection, so it essentially adopted that particular function. But just for the sake of argument, let's go ahead and hit Default, and we'll start over. Again, with the drop-down menu selected, I'll come down here to Keystroke. I'm going to hit Control-Alt-Z, and I'll name it Undo. And I'll tap OK. Now, again, once I hit that button, when I'm in Photoshop, it will undo or step backwards through my history states. Let's go ahead and set up one more. I'm going to go ahead and select Keystroke once again. I'll hit Control or Command-J, which will duplicate a layer in Photoshop. And I'm just going to say Duplicate Layer here in my keyboard. And once again, tapping OK. Now you can see that it's assigned to Duplicate Layer. You're only limited when assigning Express keys to your imagination. Essentially, anything that is a keystroke or can be assigned a keystroke can be applied to your Express keys. In addition to that, you've got a number of other functions that can be assigned. Sometimes they're application specific, sometimes they're operating specific. So I would invite you to take a look at what's available within the drop-down menu. But oftentimes what you're going to find is that you're primarily setting them up to a modifier, such as your Alt or Option or Command or Control, or a keystroke. It's that simple. So what about the touch ring? To set up your touch ring, you're going to apply the same type of function that you did with your Express keys. So by default, you've got 3 individual functions applied to both touch rings. Again, you can set this to essentially any function that has a forward and a backward motion or an up and a down kind of motion. Let me explain. By default, you can zoom in or out of an image. You can adjust your brush size. And in this case, you can also rotate your canvas. Now, if that's not something that you typically do, again, you can reassign these simply by clicking on the drop-down menu and selecting Keystroke. The dialog box that comes up enables you to define what keystrokes are applied when you run your finger around the touch ring. So let's say, for example, you wanted to cycle through your blend modes in Photoshop. The way you would do that is by first selecting your Move tool, that would be the V key, and then holding Shift plus, or in this case it's equals. And anyways, that would assign a blend mode. So let me just go ahead and type blend mode. That would function one way. Now we want to go the other way. So tapping in the bottom box here, once again, I will hit V if that's what I want to select, my Move tool, and then I'm going to hit Shift minus. Clicking OK will enable me to do that. At that point, again, all I would have to do is click on one of the function buttons to select that particular operation. So that was a quick introduction of the use of the Express keys and the touch ring. We went over a lot of information in this short video. We talked about getting the Cintiq out of the box, setting it up, the connections, manipulation of the display itself, getting it comfortable in your lap. I hope what you found here was very productive and very informative. Make sure you visit additional videos on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/WACOM.